That's great. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February call, which is our first call of the year because we canceled the January call. And then I didn't get info out about the February call because, life gets in the way of life. And what I thought I would do today when I was like, oh, I need to send that out, is do the same, give you a preview of the presentation I'm doing at the Ontario Camping Association conference 2 days from now on Wednesday, which also sort of forced me to better plan the presentation. So we'll see how that goes. But what will happen is I'll share my screen and go through a basic slideshow. And then hopefully finish in time to have you ask questions and give you some updates on OMI stuff going forward. So this is the title of the presentation that I'm giving is Building for the Future, 20 Years of Facility Investments at Pearce Williams. I've been at Pearce Williams this will be my 20th summer in 2024. And we have invested between $3 and $4 million in the program and in the capital since I arrived at Pearce Williams in 2005. One of the things as we go through this is the idea that I'm going to talk about four main areas: strategic planning, budgeting, prioritization, and grant writing, fundraising, and maybe some investment. We'll see. But the idea is that we all need to plan better. And if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And this is one of the big things that we talk a lot about still at Pearce Williams to this day. A brief history of why this became a thing for us at Pearce Williams is that I arrived here in 2005, and there were some issues that the board of directors needed someone to guide them through and fix. And a lot of that was just spending and staffing and just generally maintaining and managing a facility of the nature of Pearce Williams, which since 1973 has had a year-round component. And so in 2005, 6, and 7, I really got things under control, according to myself, and then thought to myself, my family was starting to get established here, and I liked it here, and my wife was now a teacher in the local school board, and so I went to the board and I said, where to now? Right? You can make a life in camping if you really want to as a fixer, as someone who goes from site to site and fixes issues and problems. But in my reality, I wanted my kids to grow up in the same place for their entire childhood would be amazing. And that has since happened. They've both gone off to university. But the board, I really said, where to now, right? Tell me where we're headed, and I will help steer this ship in that direction and go. And so what happened as we moved forward was that we had a variety of things that happened. Now, a bit of a caveat before I go any further. You really need to have a different mindset, or you need to change your mindset as you approach things of this nature. And part of that is that this is not a short term, like what you're about to see and listen to is a 20-year journey. And it's not short term, and it hasn't been all roses. It has been some challenging times and a lot of sort of failures, and a lot of successes. So I approach this with the caveat that this is a long-term thing. As far as short-term solutions, that's a wholly different question. And having a board of directors that supports the direction you're going is super, super important. If your board does not support it, or if you have dissenters on the board, it can be a bit of an issue. or be the biggest issue, because it's very hard to move forward without those things. Here are the 4 areas that I was thinking about when I was thinking about this presentation to give to camping professionals. I want to talk, and I'm going to talk about strategic planning. I'm going to talk about budgeting. I'm going to talk about prioritization, and then fundraising and grant writing. And maybe, once again, maybe a little bit of the investment side. This is all in relation to capital infrastructure investment in your facility. I'm not going to talk about, and some of that applies to your vision and strategic planning, but and that also goes into program things, right? Who do you want to be and what do you want to be? And so we'll get into that. Feel free. We're going to have a time at the end for questions. Feel free to write your question in the chat box, and I will try and come back to it when I am done presenting. And also feel free, as you're watching this presentation, to think through what more information you want, right? I'm presenting this in 2 days to the Ontario Camping Association conference, and I want to make sure that that people come to a session like this and get information that is useful to them as we go forward. So under strategic planning is the idea, I want to talk about what we did, and I know that Laura's going through this right now at Lambton Center. Strategic planning is the idea for us that we needed to know where our site was at. You can throw money at your camp and your facilities because you think something needs to be done, or you can invest money in your camp and facilities because you know things have to be done. We approach Pearce Williams here with this idea of today's camper's camper. And today's camper's camper is the idea that if a 7-year-old comes to camp today, and in, let's say, when they're 27, they have a child, so that would be 20 years from now, and that child comes to camp when they're 7, that would be 27 years from now, are the investments and choices we're making for our capital and for our program going to ensure that Pearce Williams is here for today's camper's camper? In having an Indigenous camp director last summer, we talked a lot about the idea of 7 generations, which is super long. And that's part of the Indigenous culture, is this idea of it takes 7 generations to correct harm that's done, but also we need to think about what we're doing for 7 generations into the future, and are we adding value? And so in strategic planning, we came up after the board and I knew that, you know, they wanted me to stay, and we came up with a plan. And one of our board members was an architect, and he had run a visioning architectural company where they worked a lot with churches and different religious organizations to do visioning as well as the architectural plans for any changes. Because oftentimes we have, as people in our organizations, we don't have the foresight to know that we want to do something. Gary Forster was a YMCA camp consultant in the States, and he always had this article about the idea of, are you ready for $1 million donation? And most camps would say, yes, we're ready. Gary Forster would argue you're not. And what he would say is, what would happen is a board member would say, if you don't have a plan, you're not ready. And so he would say, great, you get $1 million donation and you think, oh, we could build this new gymnasium with this $1 million. And great, we'll build the new gymnasium with the $1 million. And the board's like, yeah, we'll build a new gymnasium. And they go out and they start to build it for $1 million. Well, cost overruns happen. So the $1 million building becomes a $1.2 million building. So you're like, oh, we'll raise funds for the other $200,000. And then you raise funds and you open the building, and then you realize that building needs lifetime of maintenance, right? And so how are you raising the funds to do that lifetime of maintenance? And Gary Forster would argue that the planning would be to build a $750,000 building, account for cost overruns, and account for a bit to go away into a fund that would forever service the lifetime of a new building for maintenance and upkeep. And so with strategic planning, what we went through was a site audit. And what you're looking at on the screen is an image of camp. This is Pearce Williams before we changed anything. And so Pearce Williams has two sides, a west camp and an east camp. Even that was a change from what we had done prior to that. Prior to working with the architecture firm, we called this area right here, we called this main camp. And this area over here, which we now call lease camp, we call this secondary camp. So if you rented from us and we'd say, oh, we're giving you secondary camp, which would make you feel like you were secondary to our whole thing. And the architects were just like, why don't you just call it east and west? Because they're different sides of your property. And it's just one of those like, yeah, why don't we? And so it was an eye opener. And this is Pearce Williams before we changed anything. And in the strategic planning, with the architecture firm we worked with, it also went through a visioning process. And so they come in and they did like layout and design plans for all of these buildings. So we have internal drawings, we have measurements, we know exactly how many square feet. They're correctly oriented on the maps. This is a 2-scale map. And then they brought in engineers, structural engineers, pool engineers, septic engineers. They had people who looked at everything so that we knew exactly where our facility was at that moment in time. One of the stories I like to share is that this cost us in 2009, this cost us around $35,000. And in 2009 dollars, 35,000 was more than it is today. But my maintenance guy was really pissed off that we were doing this, which is a classic maintenance guy. Because he's like, do you know how many roofs we could put on buildings with $35,000? And what I said back is, I think we could put lots of roofs on, but how would we know we're putting them on the right buildings? And so that is the way that I envision this. One of the first ways that a church dies, there was a church close to us, and they voted, I saw in their minutes that they voted not to fix a leak in the roof. And that is, you're just essentially giving up. If you have a house or somewhere and you don't fix the leak in the roof, you're not protecting what's underneath it. And so for us, that's what a site audit is. It's really a protection for everything underneath it. So as we move forward, we can get a better, we can know that we're making choices that are in the best interest of Pearce Williams and the stewardship of Pearce Williams. This site audit that we had done has been utilized by us almost, if not weekly, if not daily, every week since 2009. We use this to create our fire exit plans. We use this to create basic maps for groups. We use this to really prioritize which projects we needed and wanted to do. And it is this planning and visioning allowed us to sort of envision a future. And that future took place in this image here. You can see that is very different than the previous one. Now, the next thing after you do a site audit and site planning is that you're going to do budgeting. That budgeting is a whole bunch of estimates. As you look at this map here, this is not what Pearce Williams looks like today, 15 years later. This was the vision of what Pearce Williams might look like if we went that route and raised a lot of money to do it. Under the budgeting aspect, you really need to have a contractor or someone who is friendly to camp, and the architects can certainly help out to let you know that your guesstimates at what a building or a project would cost, right? They're going to help you guesstimate and estimate what it might cost to build a new barn, or what it might cost to build a new eat, sleep, and meet space that can sleep 50 people. And when you're doing that budgeting, that just helps you understand where the money and how important that money is to you. And so when you get those estimated costs, you as a camp director and as a board of directors can start to make choices about what your prioritization will be. And so as you look towards, so in a site audit, and for us in our infrastructure spending, what you're looking at is a little screen capture of what the priorities were. So in our site audit, they had done priority 1 is seriously unsafe condition and could lead to imminent failure and impacts life and safety. And so you can see we had a variety of priority 1 conditions, and we had a priority or a variety of priority 2 conditions, and then priority 3, and then priority 4. These were, I think, priority 4, to get down to priority 4 was like the 3rd page on our list. This was a full list of things from the engineers, from the architects, from everyone who came on site, and they gave us a list of, you can see over on the one side, either to replace, repair, demolish. There was a lot of replace, there was a lot of repair. And what we did so this all happened in 2009. And prior to that, I'd probably spent very little money overall on capital upkeep. I'm sure you all have maintenance upkeep of your buildings and property, and you have that as a budget line. And that's really what we're doing with some small grants, $10,000 and $20,000 grants prior to doing this visioning. In prioritization, it's really important to sit down and know what your goals are, and that's where the visioning that happened during that strategic planning really, really come in and are super important. The reality is that when you see a list of the priorities from the architecture firm versus what you need to prioritize, this, as a reference, would say that we were supposed to tear down the maintenance barn like immediately. Failure imminent. It only took me another 5 years, but that maintenance barn is not in existence anymore. Neither is the creativity barn. As we prioritize, we did a capital campaign in 2012. I think we started in 2012. We did a capital campaign to try and raise $4.5 million. We did not raise $4.5 million. I learned a lot of lessons from that capital campaign, and I had zero fundraising experience prior to that, beyond like going and asking churches for money and concerted fundraising. I had no idea. But our prioritization took the list of things that we wanted when you were looking at things like the new buildings on the budgeting image that we're looking at. And it really said, here's the project and here's how much this would cost to do. And then we listed all of those projects when we were prioritizing, which covered a whole bunch of the needs that you're seeing on the prioritization slide. We listed those projects and then put them in the order we thought they should be in. And I was looking for that. I have that as a physical thing, and it will be at my presentation on Wednesday. I couldn't find the image of it tonight, but it literally allows people to look at what those costs are. And when we put it into our capital campaign booklet, it allowed people who read the booklet, potential donors, to see where we thought our prioritization was. And we also had a rule that if you wanted to fund a specific project and you funded all of it, then that could jump the list, could jump up and become the first priority because it's fully funded. But this prioritization is really something for your facility once you've gone through, and it's easy once somebody tells you what your priority 1 conditions are, because these are things that you should do immediately. And these are things that, knowing what I know now about fundraising, would be super easy to fundraise because we have data. This was never a public report. I never shared this with the public. The board knew about this, and we knew about it, but it's not like we said, "Oh, the Creativity Barn is failure is imminent, but we're going to have your kids in there to do arts and crafts for the next 3 years." Um, we just kept using it, and um, nothing bad happened. So that was a good thing. But when you prioritize, it's really important to make sure that you're on the page that is in the best interest of your facility as well as the best interest of the users of your facility. One of the things that the biggest thing is this idea of fundraising and grant writing. If you were, I want to clear up something about fundraising versus grant writing. Many boards of directors believe to this day that you're going to get most of your money from grants to do these projects. And it is categorically false. Grant writing is an art and a science, and grant writing is not guaranteed. We have written here at Pearce Williams many grants. I know that those out of the province of Ontario hate hearing us refer to the Ontario Trillium Foundation, but I have some numbers here. So from a grant writing perspective, we've gotten somewhere around $625,000 from Trillium over the years, somewhere around $240,000 from Westminster. And this is a mix of program and capital. So these aren't all capital improvement, capital things. Probably $120,000 from a local charity, Green Lane, which is the Toronto Dump. Accessibility for All, which is a federally run program. We've gotten around $230,000 for accessibility from the United Church Capital matching grant, that $4,000 matching grant. I guesstimate $40,000. It might be slightly more than that. That's $4,000 a year for a number of years. If you added up all of those grants, and remember, that's not entirely capital investment, so it's not entirely infrastructure investment. We've raised somewhere between $1.25 and $1.5 million in grants, which is great, which is amazing. And spread over 20 years, that's still a fairly solid number as we move. When I think about fundraising, and I've now done a lot more things on fundraising. And if you want to know the basics of fundraising, there's a podcast called Fundraising at Camp that I co-hosted with my friend Heather from Pennsylvania, who's a certified fundraising professional. What I know is that with fundraising and in the capital campaign planning with our consultant, we were told that, yeah, you're going to get most of your money from individuals. With fundraising, and that includes our capital campaign, we had a fire order campaign, we had our COVID campaign, and plus just yearly giving and whatnot. In the same time frame that I've tracked those grants, we've raised somewhere around $2.25 million. That's a really important distinction, right? To know that individuals and small donors can add up to much bigger things. Now, that's also not to imply that the entire 2.25 was capital, but during our capital campaign, easily 1.5 of that was directly to capital only. And when we do fire needs, that was another $300,000 directly to capital. And so it's just a matter of knowing when you're doing fundraising and grant writing, and this is not a fundraising or grant writing workshop. Those you can do online, and those you can figure out, and if you can't figure them out, you can always reach out and ask questions. I know that Cave Springs recently asked me a question about grant writing and how to really sell yourself for grants. And one of the things that Pearce Williams has going for it that some facilities lack is that we're year-round and we're community-based, meaning that it's not just about our United Church camping program, our Christian camping program for youth in the summer. And so when you have a ton of different people using your facility, it becomes much easier to seek grants because you are serving the larger community, not just your little niche in the world. And so that is not an easy thing for some people to hear. With grant writing, what I say is do your research and find granting organizations close to home. The same as fundraising. One of the things you can do for grant research is you can drive around one day and go to every hospital that's close by or anywhere that's ever done a capital campaign, and you take a picture of their donor wall. Totally legal, no ethical issues here. You're taking a picture of the donor wall, you're noticing what foundations have given, you're noticing what individuals have given, and that is information you can use in your own campaigns if you go forward. And for grants, I know that our local library in London, Ontario has access to Grant Connect, which is a grant program. Now, the thing is you need to go into the library to use it, but it's a way that you can look up foundations and whatnot from across Canada. I know Grant Advance is another one of those. Both Grant Connect and Grant Advance are paid things, but I know that Grant Connect is in our local library and is in some other libraries. Locally here in London, we have something called the Pillar Nonprofit Network, which also gives us access to some more information as well if you're a member of those. And so in reality, fundraising is always going to raise more. Donors and fundraising is going to raise more than grant writing. It might be easier to sit down and write a grant in your mind than ask people for money, but money moves mission. And to go from vision to application, you're going to need to move that mission with money. And remember that when you're asking people for money, you're asking for the amazing program you're offering and to change the lives of children. The idea of investment is that you, in your budget, the more and more you can raise the number that you have for maintenance and maintenance projects and repairs, the better off your facility is going to be long term. There are some facilities that you arrive at, not naming any names, but you might arrive at and you might think to yourself, I don't even know where to start. Like, I don't know, like there's so much that needs fixing or repair. What have people been doing for the past 50 years? And many of our camps have started in that state where there was a lack of capital investment, deferred improvements, deferred maintenance and repairs. I recently toured Route 66 last November and visited 6 different camps on my trip. And at every one of those camps, deferred capital maintenance and repair and improvements was something that they all mentioned and they all struggled with. That their boards didn't invest in it or didn't see that as the big priority. And once again, you need to balance that. Some people argue that program is more important because we're serving kids. That's false. You are serving kids and program is important. Those are both true things. The thing is that capital investment has to be part of this as well, or else your facility is not going to be around to serve those kids. And so you really need to make sure that you do this investment. Your accountants, well, I don't know about your accountants. Our accountants here at Pearce Williams would like us to invest $100,000 a year into upkeep and new projects at Pearce Williams, because that would defer the amortization cost of our facility, or the depreciation cost. So every year, the facilities at Pearce Williams depreciate in value by about $100,000. And if we invest $100,000, we keep offsetting that so that it doesn't depreciate and it maintains its value. And that's good for us, and that's good for the facility, and it's great for our user groups as well. And those user groups are our rental clients, as well as our summer campers and camp families and churches that use us locally within the United Church. And so as you go through facility upkeep, yearly maintenance, and amortization and renovations, it's always about having a plan. And it's a plan where so locally there's a capital grant that is coming up at the end of this month, and me and my maintenance guy walked through buildings and talked about what capital needs we had and how a project might appear, and how to replace things that we just built in 2009, because 2009 is 15 years ago. So when the bathrooms were done in 2008, 2009 in our Williams Hall, they look 15 years older now, and we could rejig them and make them look better. Or we could rejig the 1973 bathrooms that are in our below our main dormitory building and turn them into an inclusive bathroom facility with all rooms instead of stalls, and a big open area with sinks in the middle versus separating into genders. And these are all projects that I'm not sure that I'll have all of the stuff all the information in place to apply in the beginning of March for this capital grant for that project, but at least I will have knowledge of what I need to apply the next time. And so it's all about planning and thinking ahead as you walk around your facility, and about what you're going to invest in. I don't know what the next slide is. Oh, successes and lessons learned with no photo. I've learned nothing. Our big things that we've done, we built a new hall. We had a single donor give us $450,000 because it was in a book, because it was a picture, because he could see it, and it was a capital campaign, and he could see his name on it. It was a living donation of $450,000. And it is our most beautiful building, and we wanted it to be a building that was built for 50 to 60 years. We didn't want to think about it. Mm-hmm. And that's really been my thing when I think about successes and lessons learned, is I think about the idea of how to better, when we build something at Pearce, I always use this phrase that I don't want to think about it ever again. So we have new roofs on all of our buildings, and almost 99% of those are, probably 90% of those are metal roofs, because it's going to last for 50 years. I'm not going to be here, even if they were put on 10 years ago, I'm not going to be here in 40 years. And so I won't think about them. Whenever we put a new deck in place currently, we pay a bit extra for helical piles versus putting wood into the ground in the forms of posts, because those helical piles will be there for the next 100 years. And even if the deck rots, it can be taken apart and built back on top of those helical piles with the new construction. I like to think through things that I don't need to worry about. And some of that is this idea that you also want to, one of the lessons I've learned is to really know what is in the moment and what funding organizations are going to give you. So currently in 2024, environmental improvements, things that are going to make your site more environmentally friendly, less electrical use, less fossil fuel use. There are tons of grants out there for those. Accessibility is always a big one. And it's really something where if you can make the more accessible you can make your site, the better, because you will serve more kids and more groups will want to come and use your site, especially as our population ages. So if you don't see yourself doing, program for older adults, then accessibility might not be a huge priority. But for us, it's about making sure that groups can bring whoever they want, and the participants in those can feel included. When we've built any new building at camp, so Humes Hall or our new barns, or when we renovate a deck, we make sure everything is fully accessible. And when I build something new, It needs to be what I call roll-in ready. So a wheelchair can just roll in. There's no ledge. And we're very blessed here at Pearce Williams to have a lot of flat dirt, land, clay. I don't deal in Canadian Shield, and this would be much more difficult if I were a camp that was on Canadian Shield or on a rocky surface. The other thing to think about is inclusivity, right? So as we think about our making our bathrooms more inclusive by removing any gender tags, it will do two things. It'll update our bathrooms. It'll make them more accessible because we can put in accessible things, and it will make it inclusive because if they're bathroom rooms as opposed to stalls. So when I say a bathroom room, I mean a toilet, a water closet. It's a toilet in a space. And we're making it slightly larger so that people could still change in there if they wanted, if they felt like that was what they needed. And then there'll be shower rooms, and then the hand sinks will be out in the middle. And so that inclusivity and trying to make sure that people are welcome is key. And the other lesson I really I was saying it just a few minutes ago, right? Invest so you can forget about it, right? Finding the funds to put things in place and build it so that you never have to think about it again gives you a peace of mind and will allow you to move forward knowing that you have left your facility and your place better than you found it. And that should be our goal. As we go through all of these things, and thinking about our planning and visioning and strategic planning, it's all about leaving it better than we found it, because we're stewards of our properties at this moment in time. But somebody else will come along, and we want them to talk really good about us when we leave, to be like, oh, well, they left us in good hands and in a good place to continue to move forward and grow our programs. So that's my presentation. I am welcome to take any questions. You can unmute yourself and you can just ask. I don't see anything in the chat, which is fine by me.
I had a question, Joe.
Yeah, Lance.
Our camp built the conference center I mentioned, but they didn't fundraise all of it, so they left $1 million debt.
Yeah.
And the consensus seems to be nobody wants to invest in a debt. And the board finds it difficult to fundraise to pay off a debt. I wondered if you had any wisdom or experience on managing a debt.
The wisdom is it's hard to fundraise for a debt. There's old documents from before my time here at Pearce Williams where they actually labeled a campaign in 2000, Retire the Debt. And it was not that successful. What I do, the answer, I don't have a great answer for you, Lance. It's a difficult proposition, but that goes to this idea that we should have a strategic plan before we invest millions of dollars into something. There are some camps that believe that a year-round facility will solve their problems, and that I do not believe that is a surefire thing, people, because and Lance can tell you from experience as he lives it, it can be a challenge. Pearce Williams, and this is years ago, I had a conversation with a chairman of a chairperson of another camp, and it made me realize when I got off the phone that Pearce Williams had a 40-year head start, right? Starting in 73 and building a mineralized site was like a very forward-thinking thing to do in 1973, and they've just had the head start. But the advice for everyone else here who's not Lance is don't spend before you raise it, because it's going to be almost impossible to fundraise or to get a grant to pay it down, right? Because how do you write that? Yeah, I'm sorry, Lance. There's no easy answers there.
No, there's
I'd like, Lance, I got just a something that we're dealing with right now. When we replaced our 6 cabins, we had them built by Rotary, Kiwanis, service groups in the area here. Took on the project of actually building a cabin each. We haven't approached them yet on this, but the hope is that we can get them now to say, this is my cabin, and we'll paint it as it needs to be done, and we'll replace the deck as it needs to be done. So this is what we're going to be doing this year, is reaching out to those service clubs that built them and say, how about maintaining them?
Great.
It's an idea.
For sure.
Any other questions right now? Or was it all clear as mud? Laura.
Yeah, not a question, but just a comment for Lance. That is a tricky one. One of the things I have found a little bit useful this year is that I've gone back to the original minutes of the original board of Lambton Center and found the names of the people who set the original kind of vision and goals, and connect to the community that way through, this is something that this person dreamed of. We got to this point. We want to continue to follow through on it. I don't know if you have access to those documents, but I have found it really a cool way to connect with the community who was previously involved here, who were, part of, who were friends with those people who wanted those things, to see those things happen.
So it makes it more personal that way, it sounds like.
Yeah. It is. It's not an easy thing. And $1 million is $1 million. So it's trying to find people who believe in Cave Springs and, right, and can help do what they can. So, yeah. But highlights the importance of planning, right? And so I have rough drawings for a 50-person eat, sleep, meet hotel style space. And one of the things on our list, and I can showcase that in a second, just wait, 2024 0212 meeting. I'm just tracking things for Janice because she's not here. One of the things, let's share screen number 1. So one of the things I have is in this document, I have a list of potential capital projects and improvements. Can everybody see that? I can't see you, so I don't know if you're nodding your heads or not. Okay, you can see it. Great. And so what I've done, right, is, and you can see that I've, so they're not quite in order. I don't know why, but like so before I spend $4 million building something, I'm like, oh, I would rather spend $30,000 to see whether it's feasible. Is it going to be used? Is it worth that? Can we be that facility? Right. And as you go through, and I would recommend everybody do this, create a list of capital improvements. So we need windows, we need doors, we need accessible sidewalks, we need our septic fix, our water lines. We'd love to finish our World Camp buildings. We'd love to revamp our main bathrooms for inclusivity, which is what we're talking about. And in this program I'm using, and this is what I sent to our board, our architects the other day. I was like, great, this is what our bathrooms are currently like. Here's this empty space. If you emptied that entirely, this is what we could use, which is this space. And then you have these samples of inclusive bathrooms that I found online through something called Stalled Bathroom Concepts. And just the idea of having this information is super handy because I just sent that to the architects and said, hey, can you guys talk about what it would cost to do up plans for this? right? And so this list, as you can see, and now I've prioritized, right, that it would be important to have water treatment to drinkable water. I had never thought about this until I toured a camp in Texas. They have a water system that is one step away from going from like what you urinate, and they can on site, they can turn that back into water you drink, usable water. There's a bit of a mind bump there for some people, but as the climate changes and as we need things, this might be the, one of the solutions. And so we have important things, we have nice to have things, and we have someday maybe things, which are all, so someday maybe is the idea that, it's an idea, but it's not something that and then I had another column there for estimated costs, which I haven't gotten to yet because I haven't gotten to it yet. That whole page was done up after I returned from a 3-week road trip, a sabbatical, and thinking about the future of Pearce Williams and the future of camps. So it's a document, a spreadsheet that everyone should have for your own facility to know what capital improvements you would hope, and because if you don't think about it, you're never gonna be able to articulate it. So, other questions? Hearing none. How was the presentation? If I do that in 2 days, is it a thumbs up, a thumb sideways, a thumb down? Is this what people would come to the session to hear? There are no easy answers. I would say that as you go through the journey, it's easier when you have a board of directors who likes you and who supports you, and also supports the idea of the thing. Looking into the future is something that that we all need to be doing, because the future is coming at us faster than you think, as we go forward. So, yeah.
If I could throw a question in there, Joe. Many on boards do struggle with what you just said and can have a scarcity mentality. Oh, we can't do this. We don't have money. We don't see the money in the bank, so we can't do that. We can't do that. Which leads, of course, to what you said about, well, we can't fix the leaky roof. So I think there's work with the board to help them develop that mentality that you just described. I wondered if you gained any wisdom about how to help a board be forward thinking even when the money's not in the bank.
Well, the planning stage and going into debt is the last thing you want to do, right? Like, it's the last thing that my board wants to do, and my board's always worried about money, and if I can go out and find the money to do things, I'm allowed to do it. But some of that is this idea that you need to spend money to make money, right? That's an old adage. And so Pearce Williams is very blessed recently to hire a part-time fund and donor development coordinator, who sits in the office for 20 hours a week, and all they do is work on grants and donor relations. And honest to goodness, the amount of weight it takes off me is huge. And part of that talk with the board because we never advertised for that position. And this is the other thing, and I don't know how you put this in a presentation, but like, you need to be, I hope that you all become or are an organization that can notice when something is gifted to you and you should move on it and adjust things to do that. Meaning, I was on sabbatical for a few weeks last November, October, November, and we had advertised for a new camp director and for a new guest services and office manager. And when I got back, I went through the resumes and I picked 3 or 4 people to interview for the guest services and 3 or 4 people to interview for the camp director. And we went through the interviews, and we had 2 people for the guest services, 3 people actually, who could all have done the job. They could all have done the job. One of them, though, came with a CFRE, a Certified Fundraising Professional certification being worked on. came with experience doing funding stuff and grant writing, and unbelievably lives 6 minutes away from Pearce Williams in the town of Fingal, Ontario. And one of the other people who interviewed for that position lives 10 minutes away from Pearce Williams in the other direction in Wallacestown, Ontario, and had grown up at camp because her grandmother was the camp cook and had 17 years of experience being an office manager in a larger organization. And so before I went to the board, I went to my budget lines and I worked through things and I said, hey, here's my plan. I want to hire them both, even though we didn't even have this position. But the amount of work that it takes off of me and allows me to do other things to benefit Pearce Williams is huge. And that is that $30,000 to $40,000 is really an investment in our future of Pearce Williams, which is a safer thing to spend than going, into debt on a capital project. But if that goes right, then we could, right? There's only upside to this investment, right? There's only an upside to that investment. The other thing, like we noticed today, that our camper enrollment is way up. Like our new camper enrollment at this point is up unbelievably 235% from this point last year. 235%. I was like, that's a ridiculous number. It's in Camp Brain as a report. And the only thing we could think about is that we've just been more consistent on social media. And you know what we did? We're paying someone else to do our social media. Someone who loves camp does our social media, who's not one of us in the office because we have other things to do. That's all we can think about. The fact that it's my daughter doing social media is beside the point. She still loves camp. But this is all of these things when the good Lord puts something in front of us, our organizations need to be able to, in a scarcity mentality, oftentimes you'll be like, well, we can't do that because of this. And I would think that somewhere like Cave Springs, Lance, might be even more worried now that they're carrying a debt, right? And now they're even like all of that, their chest, your chest maybe gets tight at night thinking about, right, like the investment. And we can pray for you for sure, but it's always a big challenge. And so when an opportunity comes, I hope that our organizations can shift and adjust things to be like, let's take this opportunity on and see where the benefit lies. Great. We are 2 minutes from the end of our hour together. I was on a meeting today with the executive directors of the various Outdoor Ministries Connection Council members. So today, the Episcopalian Outdoor Ministries was there, the Outdoor Ministry Association of the United Church of Christ, the Lutheran Outdoor Ministries Association, the United Methodist Outdoor Ministries Association, and there was someone else I'm missing. And one of the big talks one of the things we were talking about is that there is another great gathering happening. And if you weren't at the first great gathering, what a great gathering is all of our associations, hundreds of people get together in one place and for 4 to 5 days, and you have a 500 to 700 people meet up, and you can chat and talk and visit. A couple of things. It is in November of 2025. November 9th till whatever that, I think it starts on a Sunday and ends on a Friday. So somebody could look at a calendar and say what that is, November 9th to something else. It will be, if you were at the first one, it will be at Lake Junaluska again, because there's only so many sites that can host upwards of 1,000 people for a conference. Lake Junaluska is in North Carolina, and I'm giving you those dates and that information so that you can start to think about sending someone from your camp, finding funding for that. We will, as OMI, we will approach the United Church to see if there's funding for us. I also don't know where the United Church is at. I don't know where they're at in funding Connections, which would be a United Church national gathering for camps in Canada. I don't know where they're at with it because they don't share that. General Council happened 2 years ago, and Rendezvous is happening this summer. So theoretically, we're supposed to be in 2025, but I'm not sure there's any funds in the mission and service for. Somebody smarter than me needs to figure that out. But any questions, comments, concerns, queries? Doug.
Not really. Just wanted to say thanks. And I might be calling you to ask a bit about we're starting that same planning process right now. Well, started it last year, so putting together all the documentation and that. So if you don't mind, I might bug you a couple of times just for some info.
I don't mind. There's many people here. Like, I love talking about camp. I think about camp 24/7. This is what I do. And I say that with no, but I still have some sort of work-life balance. I don't,
yeah.
But it's camp.
Yeah.
It's balanced because it's one thing. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight and for listening. I'll let you know if this presentation goes off the rails in a couple of days with a quick email. But we'll send out information. In the email you would have gotten today, make sure that you've signed up to get your free membership to Campfire Collective. And Joel should reach out after you filled that as they were trying to get. I'm not sure if he's sent out login emails to people yet, but we can touch base with him. He has. I see some people nodding. Great. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.